Hey, it's Shana. Welcome to Controlled Chaos, the podcast where we dive into the world of recovery, sharing stories of experience, strength, and hope from those who have been there and made it through. No matter where you are in your battle with addiction, alcoholism, or mental health struggles, know that there is a way out. Throughout my sobriety journey, I have often felt alone and doubted my ability to even stay sober. Starting this podcast in my room just 2 months ago, I had a dream of reaching people just like me, those who felt hopeless. As a woman in recovery, I began with 0 followers, but with a dream of offering hope to even just one person. The mission of this podcast is to connect, inspire, and provide hope to those feeling lost or struggling with addiction. Remember, the opposite of addiction and isolation is sobriety and connection. Let's come together through the Controlled Chaos podcast and support each other on the journey to healing and growth. Hit that subscribe button, leave a review, and let's build a community of support. Welcome to Controlled Chaos. My name is Shana, and I'm here with Jeanine from Chasing Heroin, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yay! Can you tell us just, I don't know, just a little bit about yourself, like growing up, all that jazz?
Sure. So I'm from Georgia, sort of. I lived in a bunch of different places. My dad was in the Air Force, so I actually lived in the Philippines for a little while. I lived in Ohio. I've lived everywhere, but mainly Georgia. We got there when I was like 8, and I'm from a really good family. And I share that because often I feel like the stereotype attached to someone that becomes a homeless heroin addict that is going to go to prison for robbery, you think broken home. And in my case, that's so not true. Both parents were in the home coaching Little League. My mom was our youth minister. I just had her on this week, actually, on my show. Youth minister. My parents were really nice to each other and got along. Now, they did end up divorcing when I was a senior in high school, but there was no conflict in the house. They were always available. My dad's a pilot. He made good money. So we had like health insurance and dental insurance. And the longer I've done the show, the more I've learned that that's not always the case for people, right? Like really a more privilege than I even realized, right?
Did you get to travel all the time because he's a pilot?
Yes. Uh-huh.
That's amazing.
This is going to annoy anybody that hears it, but not only did we travel, we flew first class most of the time.
I love it.
Because it was free. My dad never would have put us up in first class if we were paying, but we often got to fly first class. And so I really had this like idyllic childhood, and I was really like good, right? In high school, I smoked cigarettes a little, just because I thought it looked cool. And my mom had smoked cigarettes when she was younger, which I knew. And so I think I never saw her smoke, but like I think I kind of wanted to like maybe be like my mom or something. I don't know, or like Sharon Stone in Casino.
So cool back in the day. I smoked like my middle school, high school era too. It was like cool.
Right.
For a second.
It totally was. And I'm so glad, the Gen Z kids have so many advantages. Like they don't care about cellulite, those girls. They don't care. And it blows my mind because we were trained that it was the grossest, ugliest, most disgusting thing that could happen to a woman, or at least I was. And
growing up, my sister had liposuction on her ass.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That would be like literally unheard of now. She was like, why is it so big?
Right. Totally. And they get to have all of that. And then also the smoking, they don't smoke. I just feel like in some ways, obviously, they don't have a lot of advantages because of all the social media stuff. But some of the progress that's been made, I think is really positive for that particular generation. You know what I mean? But so I was a really good kid. I smoked. I drank a teensy tiny bit, but not much, hardly anything. And then, like I said, my parents split up when I was a senior in high school. And I completely went off the rails after that. I think actually because my family dynamic was so good that it was a total shock. And I really didn't handle it well. And when I look back though, that's one of the things that made me realize that I am truly an addict, because I always said it was situational, right? Like I knew I was drinking and doing coke back then, but I thought it was situational. I'm sad because my dad left, whatever. And then as I got older, I realized a lot of people's parents get divorced and they don't end up like shooting heroin and being homeless. And so
can I ask what, like, because you didn't do that kind of stuff in high school. So what was like your
first like experience? Like what made you all of a sudden say yes? Like obviously you weren't in a great place, but like what happened?
So the first time I did, it was really kind of conscious. So the first time I
Mhm.
smoked weed is actually before this and really uneventful. This was before my dad had left. It was like kid shit. I was like 14 with a girlfriend.
Yeah.
We were on spring break with both of our moms, actually. And she was
Hmm.
really beautiful. Like, you know how some 14-year-olds look 20 and
Yeah.
some 14-year-olds look like 9? I looked
Hmm.
9, she looked 20. And these
I
two
looked 20.
I almost just said you were the 21. I can tell. Yeah, I know. So I was literally about to say that. And
Yeah.
so these two like adult men, I mean, they were probably only 18. They had a
Hmm.
car, they had like a Jeep. We were in Panama City, Florida, and they like picked us up off the sidewalk and we went with them to a remote part of the beach and we smoked weed with them. And she and I had never smoked weed. And when I look back, bro, I did shit like that all the time. And like nothing happened, but we were alone with these guys in a remote part of the beach. Anything could have happened. Nothing
Yeah.
did. We got high with them and I hated it. I felt totally out of control and really guilty. So that was the first time I got high, but again,
Right.
very uneventful. It didn't like continue from there. After my parents split up, I consciously made a decision. I remember thinking, I had this feeling of like, you tricked me. You tricked me. You sold me on this life, this white picket life, and that isn't real. That isn't what's going to happen. It didn't even happen for you two idiots. And this whole time, I could have been having fun because I studied really hard. I'd
Hmm.
gotten an early admission to a really good college and I was really focused on school. I took 5 AP classes my senior year of high school. And when they split up, I felt tricked. And I was like, this whole
Hmm.
time I could have been fucking around, drinking with my friends because none of this is real. I was just super disillusioned. And it kind of makes me sad for like the 18-year-old me, the 17-year-old me, because that life is completely real and it was real. They just divorced, but I really didn't handle
Right.
it well. So,
And things change, but you don't realize that as like a kid, right?
right, right, yeah, yeah,
Like change happens, people grow apart, or all these things,
really.
but you're like, but you really thought it was like that means it none of it was real.
Yes, that's what I
Yeah.
thought. Yeah, totally. I was like, this was never
Hmm.
a real life.
Right.
And I decided to completely kind of throw away anything I had done with
Mhm.
academics, which I did. And I did end up graduating, but like I'd been an honor roll student, and by the end of my senior year, I wasn't. And I
Right.
don't remember the first time. So I did start drinking when it was offered. I wouldn't have smoked weed
Hmm.
because I didn't like it. But the first thing I did that I loved was cocaine. And
Okay.
the first time it became available to me was with a friend of my brother's. And
Mhm.
he was mad at my dad too. And we were about to do coke. And he said something like, fuck you, my dad's name.
Right.
And I was like, cheers to that. And it was directly like at him. I was so mad,
Right.
you know? I've
Hmm.
actually never shared that before, but it was like at him. I was like doing coke at him. And then I didn't do it again for a while just because it didn't come up. But then a few years later, I was bartending in Athens, Georgia at a college bar. It was super fun. And the guys were all,
Nene. That's all I know is Nene.
meaning, what is that?
Nene from the Real Housewives. She's from
Oh, so
Athens.
the Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Yeah, she's from
Okay.
Athens. That's the only
Okay.
time I've ever heard of it.
That's awesome. So I loved the Real Housewives of Orange County, like a while ago. Like remember like Tamra
Yep, that's
and
when I
that
watched it too.
that crew I know. And then I became a little bit more aware because I interviewed Eden Sassoon. And I
Okay.
know that she did a season on The Real Housewives
Mhm.
of Beverly Hills, but I hadn't really watched it a lot. But as they were getting bigger is when I was homeless and didn't like have a TV. So a lot
Yeah.
of the housewives I like don't know. But yes, Athens, Georgia. So
Okay.
I was there and I had left my good college that I'd gotten into and gone to University of Georgia. And I decided to not finish college. I wanted to move to LA and be an actress instead because college was too hard and I didn't want to do it. And so I took a year to bartend and save money and moved to LA. So while I was bartending, I did coke for the first time.
Mhm.
And it lifted any depression that I had, just
Mhm.
gone. Like I remember thinking I did a line and I walked out of the bathroom and I was like, oh, I can do this. Is
Right.
this how other people feel? Because if this is, I can do life like this. Is this what people feel like? And I was so happy. It just lifted my depression. It made me nicer because I was like a grumpy bartender. Like I
Yeah.
used to be one of those girls. It annoys me now, but I was a real pick me girl. We didn't have that word yet, but I was a real pick me girl back then. Like I was the only chick that worked in that bar. Most nights I'd be the only chick in the whole place, which I
Yeah.
loved because it was a frat bar. It was a fraternity bar and it was very redneck. The AGRs were the fraternity that went there, which is the agriculture fraternity, which is
Mhm.
farmers. And so
Okay.
they were these rednecks, but that like kind of had a lot of money because their family had had these like farms passed down. And so I loved it when I was the only girl in the place. And
Yeah.
occasionally girls would come in and I would just like roll my eyes
You're
smoking
like,
and walk up. And yeah, and it was always like, oh, what should we get? Oh, what's good here? What did you, Tiffany, what did you get at the last place? And I would be so annoyed, rolling my eyes, just like these fucking girls. And on Coke, I'd be like, well, I don't know. What do you like? I like this.
right.
I can make you this. And I was like this, I was nice to women. I was just like nicer. And that was the first, that was like the real turning point for me was that it lifted my depression and it made me nicer. But it had an awful come down for me even back then, even in the beginning. Like,
Yeah.
you know, some people can do coke and sleep, right? And I was not one of them. I was not one
Right.
of them. Like,
Mm.
I wish I had known about like Xanax and stuff. I learned way
Right.
more about drugs later, you know, the deeper I got in. Back then,
Yeah.
I didn't know. I would have even smoked weed, something. I would just do coke and lay down, you know, which is awful.
Stare at the ceiling.
Yeah. So I spent a year doing coke in Athens. I never bought it. And I always say, you know, they say in 12 step that the disease of addiction is progressive. And for me, it was very progressive, like textbook progressive. That year I never bought it once, never.
Mhm.
And still always went to work. I think I missed like one day. I also worked at an apartment complex during the day. I think one day I went in and they like sent me home, but like, you know, never
Right.
bought it. Got into an acting school in LA, you know, flew out here, auditioned, got in to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and
Yeah.
you know, got an apartment and drove out here when I was 22
Mhm.
in my Saturn, drove cross country. And when I got here, I I met someone that was doing cocaine also pretty quickly. And
Mhm.
again, never bought it though. So for like 6 months, and it was one of the people that lived in the house that I ended up in. And so for 6 months, it was again really, really, really bad, worse than it had been in Georgia. But again, I never bought it. And after about 6 months, I actually told my mom what was going on. And my brother kind of had some money at that time from a settlement, and he paid for me to move out of that first apartment. And for the
Okay.
next 3 years, I considered myself clean. I only smoked weed and drank. And so for me, that was like a period of recovery. And I
Right.
often forgot, though, that one of the other ways I stopped was I found meth at that time. And on my calendar, I actually wrote
Mhm.
3 nights a month, I would let myself smoke meth instead of do cocaine because I liked it way more. And so I did
Mhm.
like harm reduction with crystal meth to
So
get
you were
my,
like, we're gonna do a trade right quick,
yeah,
and
yeah,
this doesn't count.
yeah. And or is better or something. And that actually worked for a month. Like I just only smoked meth. And then
Mhm.
the guy that I was doing it with, you know, something happened. I think he got fired from where I was working. And so then I didn't do that anymore. And then for 3 years, I just smoked weed and drank. And I mentioned that because I would always kind of point to that 3 years as evidence that I wasn't really a drug addict. Like later, when I was doing heroin and I was in detoxes, I would say, listen, I understand that everyone here is an addict and needs to go to meetings or whatever. I
Right.
don't. And I knew that because once upon a time I
Mhm.
was a cocaine addict and I quit for 3 years. And it wasn't until I was doing a step one timeline in a detox that I realized I had been drinking and smoking weed that whole time, drinking to excess that whole time.
Mhm.
And I hadn't been a drug addict for 10 months, which is what I'd been telling people because I'd been doing heroin for 10 months at that first detox. I'd been a drug addict for 11 years. And I didn't really realize that until I got there. But, denial is strong, right? And so I didn't even let that sink in for a few years. But, the 3 years passed where I'm drinking and smoking weed, and I went through a breakup, and cocaine got introduced back into my life again. I had started bartending, and then it went really off the rails. When it came back, I started buying it. I started buying it all the time. I would miss work. Um, and I managed to get certified to teach spin and yoga during that time because
Right.
cocaine for me was like what was your drug of choice? I don't even know.
Alcohol. I'm an alcoholic.
Okay.
I had like a rough, I would say Adderall too, right? Like I was prescribed Adderall when I was
Okay.
super young, and that was like a issue for a minute, quite a
Okay.
minute.
Okay. So cocaine bad is super different from heroin bad, right? And like
Mhm.
cocaine bad for me meant 2 nights a week, maybe three, but I'm still like going to work. It's way better than what it was later, right? When I was homeless for 5 years. And so during that time, I still had a job and I got certified to teach spin, thank God, because
Well, and
that
you're super productive, right? So does it feel like less of a shit show? Because
no,
you're okay.
no, it was
So
a
it felt like a shit show still.
absolutely. I actually wasn't that that's probably the only thing I did was get certified. I wasn't that
Okay.
like I wasn't doing acting. I mean, I was minimally productive. Like I mean, I had joined a theater company and I was in a
Mhm.
show. I got my SAG card. Um, which sounds like a lot from here, but it's really in the day to day is
Mhm.
not. Like I wasn't that productive. It was very shit showy. I was late for everything. I would be sprinting
Okay.
down Abbot Kinney in Venice going to my job. My boyfriend that I was with was always so upset with me. I was always broke. I would always miss classes. It was pretty bad. I would stay up all night and listen to like sad songs and smoke cigarettes. And God, I just thought of this. I don't think I've ever shared this anywhere. This is so embarrassing. Don't use this as the clip. But I would sit out in my yard. We lived in this beautiful little cottage in Venice. There
Mhm.
was like 4 cottages right off of Abbot Kinney. And I lived with a boyfriend that like really loved me. He paid for most of it. And the prior breakup that I'd been with this guy for like 3 years and we're actually still friends. He was like, in a way, like we were like soulmates. I think that you can
Yeah.
have more than one soulmate. And this guy, my friend Drew, was like a soulmate for me.
Mhm.
But he drank a lot and there were some other issues. So I ended up breaking up with him anyways, but I was like brokenhearted about it. And we
Right.
stayed close. And so I would go outside and do coke out of a little baggie in our yard and be on the phone with him for hours while my current boyfriend was asleep. And I would pee in the yard to not have to go back inside. I would like
Yeah.
go behind we had this like alcove with a table, and I would
Mhm.
go behind it and pee outside on the phone
Yeah.
to not have to go back inside. And it was really gross. And I do way grosser shit later when I'm older, but like for some
Mhm.
reason that feels super cringy. I think because I was in such a nice neighborhood and I don't know. And so it was very shit showy. I was not productive.
Yeah.
I managed
Okay.
to get certified and I'm like really good at teaching, right? Pretty much right away. I had like a really good ear for it and for music and cueing, and doors started opening up for me with teaching that had never opened up for me with acting or anything else.
Mhm.
And I throw that in because I feel like when we're doing what we're destined to do, things like that open up. And I was always worried that I had like missed my destiny. I thought my destiny was as an actress. And because I'd done some acting when I was a kid, like I
Mhm.
felt really called to it. It wasn't necessarily that wasn't actually out of nowhere. And I felt like I'd blown it, right? I'm 28, 29. You're not going to make it as an actress by that age, really,
Right.
you know? And you know what I thought? I thought that I thought Scarlett Johansson took my life because we were
Yeah.
kind of the same age and we kind of have
Mhm.
similar features. And I was
Yeah.
like, that bitch, I was
She
supposed to be her.
stole it.
Yeah. Uh-huh. And I realized later that you can't miss your calling. Like
Right.
spin was placed on me because I didn't even do it. I didn't even seek it out. I'd gotten fired from a job and I didn't want to go home and tell my boyfriend that I'd been fired without having a new job. And so I literally, on my way home from the bar I got fired from, I went into a little coffee shop and there was an ad on the table for a free half spin, half yoga class down the street. And it was
Yeah.
starting in 10 minutes. And so I went down, took the class, and afterwards they had a little thing on the counter that said they were hiring front desk. And I applied right then and got the job. So when I went home, I was able to tell them I got fired, but I got this new job, whatever, it's fine. And after I'd been there for a few weeks, the owner was like, okay, cool. And you get to do our teacher training, which starts next week. Because the only reason anybody worked there was to do a free teacher training because it was like 1,400
Right.
bucks. And I said, oh yeah, no, I'm not actually interested in that. I'm going to be an actress or whatever.
Yeah.
And she said, okay, well, like, let me put it this way. You have to do the teacher training to work here. And I didn't know that. And I was super annoyed, but I did it anyways. And my whole life changed. And
Right.
that was like put in, like, there was no other way for me to move other than have that in front of me. And so I do like to share that sometimes because I feel like we can't really miss our calling, So
I love that because I actually started working in treatment with women when I was 22 and like worked in that a long time during my alcoholism and quit and
oh,
was like, oh, my life is over. I've ruined everything.
yeah,
And 3 years sober, here I am back doing that. And like,
yeah,
it is my calling. I didn't ruin it. I'm doing it bigger and better now.
yeah.
So,
And
like, it
that's
really does come to where it's supposed to be, right?
comes to where it's supposed to be. And I guarantee you, you're better as a counselor now, right, than you were, right?
Yes. Yeah. I
Yes,
mean, I was full of shit then. I
right.
was lying all the time. So
And
lying.
and that's what I think happens too. Because even with my teaching, like I was
Mhm.
okay, I was pretty good, and everything ended up blowing up in LA. When I came back to teaching later, I was so much better because I had lost it, right? And so that's one of my reasons why I started to feel like my addiction was actually the best thing that ever happened to me because I was a good enough teacher that I could have just been like, here forever. But because of losing everything, I just worked so much harder than it made me better. So
Right.
I ended up leaving LA after a few years. My car blew up because I hadn't been changing the oil. I was buying cocaine all the time. Things were bad. I was living in this really crappy little
Mhm.
room and vent. It was bad. It was really bad. That's when things started to get really gross, really bad. And I ended up leaving LA and moved to San Diego. And
Mhm.
the goal of moving to San Diego was to get better, right?
Mhm.
But like I didn't really know anything about recovery and neither did my mom. And so my goal, who I moved in with at 29, which was awesome. And so
Been there.
my goal was to just quit doing coke. I was like, I can admit that the cocaine is a real problem. Fine. I am not quitting drinking. I am 29 years old. I'm single. How am I ever going to meet anybody? I want to get married. You go for drinks. No one is ever going to go out with a sober 29-year-old. That was
I
my
cannot believe how much we have in common. Like I can't even. Like you talk and I'm like,
I
all
mean,
right,
that was my biggest fear. And I
yes,
think this for a
so
lot of
true.
people, like, and I was just miserable at meetings. Because I did try to go to a few meetings in LA and I couldn't fathom dating and getting
Mhm.
married as a sober person. I was like, no one is going to want to date a sober chick. That's the most losery thing I've ever heard of. And so I'm like, cool, I'll quit doing cocaine. Fine. I'm not going to quit drinking. And so yeah, I didn't. And when I first moved in with my mom, it was real shit showy because I was driving back up to LA to get coke, and I ended up moving into an apartment. This guy that I found on Craigslist, and that's really when kind of like everything changed, right? There's a Marine base out here, and he was a
Mhm.
staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, and he had posted for an ad on Craigslist. And I moved in with him, and this is actually the guy that saves my life 5 years later. I'm sure you've heard me talk about living in the doghouse.
Mhm.
He's the one that came and got me from the doghouse and saves my life 5 years later. But long before any of that, I move in with him and I'm teaching. I was teaching bar. I had added to my certifications. Now I'm teaching Pilates, I'm teaching bar, I'm teaching at some really nice resorts. I move in with him and he introduces me to a friend of his from the Marine Corps who had retired,
Mhm.
or not retired, but had gotten out. And I start dating this guy And it is the most toxic, insane relationship of my entire life. And I refuse to break up with them, even though I know that I should. And we are together for like over a year. And he's really good looking, very good looking. And I was out of town at a funeral and I couldn't get in touch with him for a few days. And I'm like, oh, I know what's going on. This motherfucker's cheating on me.
Right.
Fly back to San Diego, go up to my place, grab my car, scream out to where he lives, which is like 30 minutes away, park in the front yard, run in their house. And his roommate was like, hey. And I was like, nope. And I run back, like bust open the door, expecting some girl to be there. And I bust open the door and it's just him laying in bed. All the lights are off with like a movie on. And there's like, you know, when there's so much smoke in a room, you can see it hanging in the air.
Yeah.
Just cigarette smoke hanging in the air. Kind of smells like weed, pizza boxes on the floor, weed pipes made of aluminum foil everywhere. And he's just laying there. And he looks up and says, oh, you're back. And I was like, yeah, I'm back. What the? Also, can I cuss or should I not?
Yeah. You're good.
Okay. And he's like, oh, you're back. And I'm like, yeah, I'm back. What the fuck, dude? I've been trying to get in touch with you for like 3 days. And he said, oh, I'm really sick. And I was like, oh, all right. You have like the flu or something? And he was like, yeah, I think so. I don't know. I'm like really sick. And I said, okay. And because this is just like the relationship that we had, I was like, well, it's your fault that I drove all the way out here. So you owe me gas money. So get up and put gas in my car. And he was like, all right. So he gets up, drives to the gas station, and his card gets declined for like $10 of gas. And then his card gets declined for like $5 worth of gas. So then I put some gas in, and he had had an oxy problem in the past that he had told me about. And, you know, because when he got out of the Marine Corps, he had an injury and he'd been prescribed some painkillers, and I guess it had gotten out of hand. But when I met him, he was like super healthy, super fit, like big jacked guy going to work every day. Because I've looked back sometimes and thought, fuck, was he on it the whole time? But I really don't think that he was, because his behavior changed so much at around this time. I mean, he definitely smoked weed and drank, but so we're on the way home and I said, listen, if you've started doing oxy again, like, it's okay. You can tell me. You don't have to lie to me about it. I used to be a cocaine addict, right? My big line. I can help you because I quit doing coke, you know, you could tell me. And we pulled up to his house, and this moment is like seared in my brain, this like scene. He said, well, I am doing something, but it's not oxy. And I said, okay. He said, before I tell you this, though, I just want to tell you that I know what you're going to have to do when I tell you this. And I just want to say that I'm so sorry. I really wanted to be different for you. And I said, okay, what is going on? And he said, I am doing something. I've been doing heroin. And my heart like stopped. And I was so shocked and scared. I was just blown away. Because most people, when they hear heroin, I mean, it's the worst one, right? I mean, I guess now fentanyl might be, but like, you know, especially back then, heroin, you know, that's the scariest one. Like, I had lived a life of partying and never come across heroin, you know? And as I'm like absorbing this, he gets out of the car and he's walking away. And as he walked back, he told me that he was trying to kick while I was gone. Now I didn't know what any of that meant, but he was like, I was trying to quit while you were gone. I didn't know words yet, like kick or whatever. And so he's walking into the house, and I remember my instinct being like, drive away. You should drive away. But I saw him and I thought, everybody has abandoned this man. Like, I won't, you know? And I got out and you know, by the time he was in his room, I was with him and I said, I'm not going to leave you. Just tell me how I can help you. And I was Googling, like, how do you help someone who's kicking heroin? And of course, now I know you can't do shit when you're kicking heroin except ride it out. So I'm like getting Gatorade and soup. And, you know, I ended up staying there the next, you know, overnight. And I got up to go train somebody in the morning. And later on that day, we spoke. And I said, how you doing? And he was like, oh, I'm fine. I feel much better. Thank you. And I'm thinking it's like Coke, where, you might feel better the next day. Now I know he obviously just like got well with somebody at work. He smoked, he got, he did some heroin with somebody at work, and that's why he
Right.
felt better. But I didn't know that. And I
Mhm.
feel like, and I said this recently on one of my episodes, the journey that you go on when somebody entangles you in their heroin addiction is insane. You learn words that you have never heard of before: getting well, dope sick, Suboxone, methadone, kicking, like all of the words that
Right.
it's like this whole other language. And when you're the person that loves the addict, it's so confusing at first. You just have no idea what's going on. And I was in
Right.
that phase with him, right? And so I'm like, okay, great, good. And we go through the normal, like for a few months, he says he's not using, he clearly is. I catch him a few times. And then finally at some point, and of all the things I remember like details on, I just don't remember the details of this moment. But at some point,
Mhm.
I catch him and say something like, well, if it's that great, let me try it. And
Okay.
he did say, no, I don't want you to. He did kind of say that, but
Mhm.
ultimately let me try it. And I didn't like heroin at first, like I threw up and, I didn't really love it, but it gave me energy. It kind of had the same feeling as Coke, but I could sleep. And so
Really?
I
So
start doing,
I've always thought of it as like just people like nodding out and being super tired. So it's not like that for everybody, right?
well, it depends on how much you do. So
Okay.
in small amounts, it gives
Mhm.
you energy. It's kind of like if you ever had surgery or taken
Yeah.
like a Percocet or something,
Yeah.
how, like a Percocet or opiates can give you a little energy
Yeah.
sometimes. It's like that in smaller
Okay.
doses. After you've been using for years and you're doing more, you nod out. But I
Okay.
always preferred to do the amount that like gave me energy, right? Which is why
Okay.
later I started mixing meth with it. So in the beginning, I would just do a little bit and I would feel great. And I was like making new playlists for spin and like coming up with
Mhm.
new bar choreography. I lost weight. Like in the beginning, it was like actually kind of great. And after, I don't know, not that long, a month or two, I remember there was one night I wasn't going to go out and see him. And
Mhm.
I started to feel kind of sick that afternoon. And our
Mhm.
mutual friend of ours who also was strung out on heroin called me. And I had heard the guys talk about being dope sick and being strung out and stuff. But it didn't
Mhm.
even occur to me that that would also happen to me. I just thought, yeah,
Right.
I'm doing it way too much. And a friend of mine called and said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, well, I was going to go take a Pilates class, but I feel kind of sick. I think I'm getting the flu. And he said, Jeanine, you're dope sick. And I
Right.
said, no, I'm not doing as much as you guys. And he said, okay, well, I tell you what, why don't you come over and smoke with me and see how you feel?
Mhm.
And I was like, okay. So I went over there and I'll never forget this. I brought my own straw and he
Mhm.
handed me foil and straw. And I said, oh no, I brought my own. I don't want to get you sick. And I'll never forget the way that he looked at me. He was so
Mhm.
sad for me for what I was like about to discover. And
Right.
and I immediately felt better.
Yeah.
And like the horror sank in that I was strung out on heroin. And I remember looking at him and said, holy shit, did I just like accidentally get strung out on heroin? And he was like,
Yeah.
Jeanine, we told you, we've been telling you. And I said, no, no, you did not tell me. No. So what do I do? What do I do? And he said, well, I mean, you could kick. And I said, well, how long does that take? And he said, like 2 weeks. And I was like, I don't have 2 weeks. I have to teach tomorrow morning. And I had great clients and a great gig. I was making like 80 to $100 an hour teaching spin and Pilates at this
Right.
resort in Rancho Santa Fe, which is like Beverly Hills squared and is like
Right.
a really nice area down here. Yeah. And I'm like, well, I don't have 2 weeks. I have to go to work tomorrow. And he said, well,
Mhm.
you could, I mean, I guess you can buy more then, I can introduce you to the guy. And I was like, is he scary? Does he have a gun? I don't want to be the heroin dealer. This
Right.
guy also becomes vital in my recovery later, by the way, my first dealer, my first connect. And so he brings me over there and I meet the guy and I buy $20 worth of heroin. And I began buying about $20 worth of heroin every single day for from that moment. until getting homeless was like 9 months, probably, from that buying of my first bag. I'm homeless 9 months later. All the years of cocaine had not done that, although pretty close. My mom kind of bailed me out, and that's more why things weren't as bad. But 9 months later, I'm completely homeless. So, and I know I'm just like going. Let me know if you have any questions.
No, you're good.
Okay.
Go with it.
Okay. So 9 months later, I'm homeless. And the way that
Actually, hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm gonna run to the bathroom and I'm gonna
Okay.
grab a drink. If you have to pee, go pee.
I'm gonna grab a Celsius actually.
Okay, cool. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I was at like 10%, so I was like,
Oh shit. Okay.
who knows? I better go grab it. I'm
Yeah,
like the girl who will literally go to like 0.
Me too.
It's the worst. I'm like, why do I still do that shit?
Yeah, me too. Me too.
All right, so 9 months.
Yeah, so 9 months later, and like, kind of the way that happens is you end up living in your car if you have one, and then the car gets impounded somehow, right? And in my experience, that's like typically how an addict ends up homeless, and that's basically what happened for me. So
So I
the
have a
guy,
serious question.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
it because in LA all they do is give tickets? I've wanted to go there my whole entire life. I went there my first time last month and I was like, how do people live here? You have to pay to park everywhere. They ticket you everywhere. I'm like,
yeah.
what is this?
So, well, I was in San Diego by this point.
Okay.
So no, but in LA, yeah, there's definitely like I was constantly getting parking tickets in LA. That's definitely a thing. Usually if you're like a drug addict, what happens is you get pulled over for some reason. You might get arrested, or like your license has been suspended, or you had a fucking DUI that you didn't take care of, or something is up with you and they impound the car, or like your registration is expired or your insurance is expired. And if a cop can tell you're a drug addict, they'll impound the car and then you can't afford to get it out. So that's often the path. And that was like the path for me. So I was, living with a roommate who had said I had until the end of the month to leave, because it was actually the guy that I lived with initially, the Marine. He had gone away to Afghanistan for like a year and come back. And when he came back, I was like fully strung out on heroin, which he didn't know when I moved in with him. And then he figured it out after a few months and, gave me notice. I had to move out at the end of the month. And my boyfriend, the guy that I was using with, was at my house. And I woke up in the morning and he was gone. He'd gotten it before me. and I was getting a phone call over and over and over again from an unknown number. And it like kind of took me a while to figure out what was going on. And then I realized that it was probably him calling me from jail. And so I looked up who's in jail. And before I had even woken up that morning, he had gotten up before me, taken the bit of meth I had out of my nightstand, taken my car. And I'm assuming he was going to go try to trade it for dope because I know where he was headed. You
Like
know,
your car for dope?
no, my meth.
Oh, okay. I was
The
like,
little,
damn.
no, the little 20 sack that I had. So he took that because I remember my next thing was go grab that, which was gone.
Mhm.
So he got pulled over and they impounded the car because he didn't have a license and they found the meth. So before I even woke up that morning, he'd been arrested. So I have like 3 days before I have to leave my house. So I did get him bailed out, but then we couldn't afford to get my car out. And now I'm kicked out of my place. And that was the first time I became homeless. And our meth connect lived in like a broken down, like an abandoned cell phone store, like, just an old, like strip mall. One of the stores was abandoned and he had like moved in there. And so we go move in with him and don't have a car. And my ex had taken out his entire 401k, but that takes a few weeks. And so
Yeah.
after a few weeks of us living in this cell phone store, during which like I get super dope sick for the first time, I was attempting to ride a bike. I still had one last job teaching bar, and I rode my bike there, but I smelled like cigarettes and I looked like a junkie. And then finally they fired me. I also was supposed to have a court date during that time for a restraining order from some chick. I didn't make it to the court date. So then I got a restraining order against me. You automatically lose, which matters later because a few years later, I'm transporting heroin across the border from Mexico inside me. And if you have a restraining order against you, they automatically put you into secondary to do like an X-ray and search, which I didn't know. So
Inside you, like inside you.
well, they do an X-ray. They can't go in you unless they have
No, I
more.
mean like you put it inside.
Yes.
You.
Oh yeah, yeah, yes. It was inside me. Yes, like that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did a lot of that. So he gets his money finally. We go get my car and he got a lot. He got like $6,000. And we went and got my Jeep out of impound, which was like $1,100. We put 4 new tires on my Jeep. He got a haircut and we got a week at a motel. And by the end of that week, we were completely out of money. And he had been given $6,000 and blown it all. I had like no control over that money, and I don't want to blame him. It's not like I was good with money either, but after a week and crazy shit happens. We get in this big fight in the parking lot of this motel, and we have to run away from the cops and then break back into our own room later from the back because we didn't know if they were going to be there, and during that time my parents kind of decide they need to make a decision and send me to detox for the first time. So I go to detox for the first time. I go to rehab for the first time. And that starts like a 4-year period of me being homeless the whole time and just kind of going to detoxes and rehabs when I can, like state facilities.
So were your parents
Yeah.
living near you or no?
So my mom did. My mom lived out here in San Diego.
Okay. So she saw you and knew that like you weren't okay.
Yeah. And in fact, like a bunch of really weird stuff happened. Like, and I just interviewed her about it this week on my show, but like one of the days I was in the cell phone store, she was just so upset. She didn't know where I was and I was homeless. And she knew by then I was strung out on heroin. I had told her before I got kicked out. And she was like desperate to find me. And she left her job, which was like maybe 45 minutes away from where I was, headed up, headed up the freeway and was just praying to God to like find me somehow.
Yeah.
And she got this feeling to get off on this exit. She got a feeling to go left. She got a feeling to go left down the PCH and then just didn't really like feel anything anymore. And she pulled into a taco shop driveway and was like, what am I thinking? I'm just going to somehow like find her. And then she glanced up and saw my meth connect, who she recognized. She'd seen him. She was parked next to the cell phone store and had no idea.
Mama's intuition.
Yeah. So that's when she came up, just knocked on the window of this crack house. And that was when we kind of started talking about like detox. So they did know at that point. Yeah. So she lived out here and they get me into a rehab and I'm so not ready to stop. This is when I really believed that I was just a heroin addict. Like all I needed to do was get off heroin and I would be okay, right? I wasn't a real drug addict because I used to be a coke addict and had quit. I just accidentally got strung out. And I remember telling one of my first sponsors, she came to see me at the rehab and she sat down with me and I was like, look, I really appreciate like your time and that you're doing this, but honestly, I just accidentally got strung out on heroin. And as soon as I get off, like I'll be fine, you know? And she said, okay, well, you know, I can see why you think that, but, you know, just so you know, like regular people don't accidentally get strung out on heroin, you know? And in that moment, it obviously registered because I remember it all these years later. But in that moment, I was kind of like, you know, whatever. But later, again, when I was taking accountability for all of this, because it was really easy for me to blame that guy for years, I had to reconcile with the fact that that was true. You know, like my girlfriends that I went to high school with that got married and bought houses and became lawyers and stuff, they wouldn't do heroin. If they were dating a guy and they found out he was doing heroin, they would break up with him. Right. They wouldn't even date this dude in the first place. He was clearly a drug addict. You know, he had 2 felony DUIs. He hadn't had a driver's license in years. He didn't have a car. You know what I mean? Like he barely had a bank account. Like, you know, I was already in a place where heroin would be a possibility. And I had to account for that later, you know? So, but I wasn't ready to do that yet. And so I did finish that program and I learned a lot, both in that detox and in that rehab. And so like for anyone that's listening, that's a family member, you know, we are learning every time. And I know it's so frustrating from the outside, but because I relapsed a lot. And I finally realized when I did get it that all of those relapses weren't failures. They weren't continuous time, but I was learning more every time. I was gathering tools and those
like a
tools
seed planted, basically. It's not a waste of time.
No, it wasn't. And real and not, you know, even more than a seed, like a seed, but then even more than that, like real shit. Like I remember, so I had a co-host with my show initially who's not in recovery, and she was interviewing me on my 5 years. And so in the end, after all this shit that I'm talking about, right? Like I get arrested for strong arm robbery and they're going to send me to prison. I get arrested for felony domestic violence. I get arrested for commercial burglary and I was printing fake checks. I had magnetic ink in a printer and they raided the house. Like really serious stuff happens over the next few years. Like I'm a full-time criminal, right? And and I end up living in a doghouse, right? And then I go kick and my co-host was asking me years later, she said, well, how did you know when you were homeless and you were kicking, how did you know like a sober living to move into when you didn't have any money? And I said, oh, I already knew Steve, which was the owner of the sober living. And she said, oh, okay. And you were calling, how did you already have a sponsor? And I said, oh, I already knew Rachel from before. She was already my sponsor from before. And she said, oh, okay. And then like, you didn't have a car, but I know you guys are supposed to go to meetings. How are you going to meetings? And I said, oh, well, I knew where the ones were that you could walk to. And I realized as I was telling her that, I already had all that stuff because of what I had already been trying to do. All of my friends were in recovery, every single one of them. I already had a sponsor. I did know where a sober living was that I could go. All of the meetings. I had a book, you know, I had a big book, or, you know, I had a basic text from NA. I already had all that stuff. And I was learning at every single rehab, right? At every single time. So
you knew how to go home.
yeah, I did. I did. And thank God, you know, and NA around here is really great. So I'm more involved in HA now, but Narcotics Anonymous in North County, San Diego is unbelievable. Like they are just the tightest, most welcoming group of people. They're just, it's when I look back, I didn't give them enough credit when I was there, but they do like holiday things around the holidays. They do what they call 12 nights. And so for like all of the nights leading up to New Year's Eve, someone hosts a party and a meeting and anyone can go and they have coffee and food and people from rehabs can go. And like, it got me through those early years, you know, it really, really did. And even if someone listening doesn't do 12-step, because the longer I've been doing my show, I've learned that there are people that are really resistant to 12-step and they want to do other stuff. And I didn't even know that was a thing when I started my podcast. I thought there was just 12 step. And
Yeah.
I walked into situations sometimes on social media where I realized people like really get upset about that. So I'm super open now to smart recovery, or even fuck like, weed maintenance or whatever you want to do, like whatever a recovered life looks like to you. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
a recovered life is a recovered life. And so whatever you're doing, cool. But if you could find a community of people, that's
Yeah.
what was so important for me about NA. And then when I moved on to HA and I met this group of people that my husband was a part of, this is how I met my husband. That group of people was like the group of friends I had always been looking for. And we had so much fun. We had so much fun. We would go to Denny's after a meeting, and the next day I'd be teaching a bar class and I could hardly demonstrate the abs. My abs were sore from laughing. We had so much fun. I fell in love with my husband. We went to beach meetings. Now, that group of friends completely blew up because oftentimes in 12 step with young people, there's going to be some bullshit. And I want to add that because I've gone through my string now in 10 years of sobriety of friend groups through recovery, and somebody fucks somebody else's boyfriend or whatever, crazy shit happens. All the girls start bullying one girl, and like shit happens.
It
You'll find,
does.
you'll find another recovery group, and stuff like that used to take me out. So that's kind of why I include it. But so, and I don't know how much like detail you want me to go into with any of this stuff, but I end up in the end. So that's like 2011 when I go to my first detox. I get into a long-term program finally in 2014. And again, these years are really bad. Like I'm completely homeless, living outside. I have a completely picked up face. I'm a criminal full time, or, criminal. I'm like a junkie. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
a white trash junkie. You think you're Bonnie and Clyde.
Doing stuff to get money, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Dumb hustles. Stealing shit from Home Depot and returning it, stealing it from Walmart, returning it, trying to find cash receipts. Like nationwide, we are all doing the same hustles, which is really weird. Like, like some junky network where you learn all the different hustles. One time we came across a bunch of otter boxes. Remember otter boxes for phones? The thing was
Yeah.
and my boyfriend scooped out like 20 and ran, and we lived off that shit for a while. Another time we were in a CVS and a thing was unlocked with all the nice perfumes, and we just took like 2, and we would sell them on Craigslist and then go back and get more and sell them on Craigslist. We broke into my old Jeep was broken down by this point in my mom's driveway. We broke into my Jeep in my mom's driveway and lived in the Jeep for like 2 weeks before she saw us. We broke into a house there was like this mansion on the beach that they were tearing down, and it had no fixtures or electricity or anything, but we broke into this beach mansion and we lived there for 3 weeks before he broke, crazy homeless junkie stuff.
Right.
So in the end, I'm living in a sober living. I'd gone to this long-term program, got kicked out, and like kind of my big thing was I figured out how to pass a drug test, like no matter what. And so I would live in your sober living, and it would be so obvious that I was using, and all the other girls would be so mad, but I'd pass a P test. And I was doing my thing again, not working, skittering around during the day like a crackhead on a stolen bike, hustling money, coming home, getting high in the sober living. And on New Year's Eve, 2014, I was out at Chili's with actually my first drug dealer ever. The guy that years before my friend said, "Do you want to meet the guy?" And I was like, "Is he scary? Does he have a gun?"
Yeah.
This guy, he had been raided and gone to prison for 18 months, got out and was doing pretty well. He'd been out for like a year and had stayed sober. And he was always kind of trying to help me, And he took me out for New Year's Eve, and we're out to dinner, and the owner of the sober living called me. And she said, "Hey, Jeanine, so you left some heroin in the bathroom and you can't come back." And I said, 8 other women live in that sober living that are all in recovery. You have no way of knowing that was my heroin. And I passed a P test this morning, which I had. And she said, "You're right, you did. And I don't know how you've been doing that, but all the other girls are here and they're all pretty sure it's yours. And I'm pretty sure it's yours. But I tell you what, if you can bring me a blood test that says you're clean, I'll support you and you can come back."
Oh.
oh, which no one had ever asked me for a blood test before. And to her, I was like, fine, I'll bring you in tomorrow. And she was like, okay. So we get off the phone and I tell my friend Brooke, he wouldn't care if I used his name. I was like, well, I can't go back to my sober living now, like, fuck, what am I going to do? So he got me a room at a freaking Motel 6 and we go over to the motel and we're sitting there. And I was like, all right, hey, give me your phone. Cause I had like a flip phone. And I said, give me your phone. I need to Google what the logo for the hospital looks like. And I need to just Google what a blood test looks like so I can forge one, And I'm like, do they still have Kinkos? They still have Kinkos, right? Like, I can forge a document. I've actually forged a medical document before. Give me your phone. And I'm talking, and when I looked at him, he was just like sitting there looking at me. And he had been a big support of mine for a long time, and I could just see in his face though that he wasn't like with me on this,
Yeah.
And I was like, come on, don't look at me like that. What am I supposed to do? I don't want to forge this drug. I don't want to forge a blood test. I don't want to forge a blood test. I was going to kick. I have a Suboxone in my purse, which was true. I had a half of a Suboxone in my purse. And I was like, I was going to kick. I have a Suboxone, but I can't kick outside. I can't get kicked out of my sober living. She's making me forge this blood test. I don't have a choice. What am I supposed to do? And he said, I mean, you could get clean. And I don't know why in that moment, obviously, so many people had said stuff like that to me before, And I sat down and I remember thinking, fuck, like, I guess I could do that. Like, I am working so hard to make using drugs work for me. My whole life is about passing drug tests. My whole life at 34 years old has been reduced to passing some drug test from someone. My mom, the sober living, the rehab. For years, my primary goal in life has been passing a drug test for some state-funded person. You know what I mean? Like, this is my whole life. And it just in that moment struck for me. Like, I guess I could get clean. Should I try that? Should I try that? But I had a little heroin on me still. And so like I wasn't ready that second.
Right.
And I called a heroin connect of mine and said, hey, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Like I got kicked out of my sober living. And he said, well, I have a place that you can stay. You can stay in the doghouse in my backyard. And I was like, okay, sure. Really? And he was
Wait,
like,
but like he was serious and you were serious. Like,
yes.
I'm gonna go live in this doghouse. Like that was the plan.
Totally. And I was like, really? Thank you. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Was it like a shed doghouse? Was it like like a little teeny doghouse? Or like
so and that's what I always share too. So my friend brought me over there. He dropped me off in an alley and the guy let me in through his fence in his backyard. And it was actually like a little shed that his dog would stay in. It had like a dog bed on the floor with like a San Diego Chargers blanket on it.
Okay.
And he let the dog. Yeah, it was a shed. It was enclosed. It had a door. There was like some tools in there.
But why didn't he just let you in his house?
Because his wife was in there.
Oh.
So he was a heroin dealer on parole, and he was not supposed to be shooting dope anymore. He definitely wasn't supposed to be hanging out with chicks like me. He was like 65. And yeah, so we weren't like hooking up or anything.
Did she know you were in the doghouse?
No. And in fact, he would padlock me in from the outside at night. And it wasn't to keep me kidnapped. It was to keep her out. Because the last time he had a girl like staying in there that he was bringing heroin to, she tried to attack her with a chainsaw. And so I was in there locked in, not to keep me kidnapped, but so to keep her out from trying to kill me. So he brings me in the backyard. It's like a little shed. And so I'm in this shed for 3 nights, freezing my ass off. The second night, he let some guy in the middle of the night and locked us in. And it was this really scary looking guy. He had tattoos on his whole face and on his eyelids. And like, I was just sitting on the little mat and he sat, there was like, it was big enough that there was like a little like not like a beanbag chair, but something else he could sit on next to me with like his
Mhm.
legs out. And I was sitting there and I was doing a crossword puzzle, a San Diego reader crossword puzzle, smoking meth. I had a compact with a little light on it so I could like see
Mhm.
things and pick my face in the dark and shoot. And I'm doing a crossword puzzle and he sit next to me and he was like, "Hey, can I sit with you?" And I said, "No." And I kept doing my crossword puzzle and he just like sat there. And after a minute, I looked up and he was like playing solitaire on his phone. And he kind of tried to talk to me a little bit. And
Mhm.
I just was not, I just kind of ignored him. And after,
Right.
I don't even know how long, my friend came out and unlocked the door and the guy left. And I heard them talking a little outside. And I think I was supposed to like sleep with that guy for being in there. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know,
Yeah.
but that's my best guess. Like, I mean, he let him in at like 3 in the morning for like a half an
Right.
hour.
And he
And I,
didn't say anything.
no, well, I mean, the dude tried to
No,
talk.
no, no. The guy who let him in, like you're.
No, he didn't say anything. And so I don't know, but like I know now looking back that like because he was bringing me heroin and meth every day, and like there was
Mhm.
some value to me being in there because the guy was older and he couldn't find a vein anymore, but I could hit in his armpit. I could find a vein in
Right.
his armpit, and like that's pretty valuable amongst young.
Yeah.
So like I could hit his armpit. He also kind of
Mhm.
liked me. Like when I was in there, he did say that like because he knew my ex, and my ex by now is gone. He's on the run with warrants, and he's now doesn't live here anymore by this time. So I'm
Right.
homeless alone and stuff. He's been gone for like a year at this point. And he did tell me, he was like, well, I kind of always liked you, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
But again, he was like significantly older and
Right.
I don't know. So I also got really lucky. A lot of these guys that I ran around with tried to help me
Right.
and without anything in return. And it's kind of like, and I know now that that's a little different. And I don't even know, I feel very blessed that that was somehow how that worked for me because when I went to that long-term program, it was all women and we had an SA group
Mhm.
and we all went because every single person had been sexually assaulted
Yeah.
except me.
Right.
And yeah, it was 40 women. And I remember thinking, how
Mhm.
should I have been like attacked by now? And my friend Sarah was like, yes. Are you being
Yeah. I was gonna
honest?
say yes,
Yeah.
probably so.
And she was like, Jeanine, you can be honest. And I was like, I am. And I think to the end, the counselor still thought I was probably in denial about some stuff happening, but like, I don't know. There was a couple of these guys that would help me out somehow. And look at, I mean, I think, I
Mhm.
don't know. I don't know. I just feel really, really lucky. Now, again, if I had stayed in that shed for much longer, maybe he would have made me sleep with one of his friends. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I don't know, I'm assuming that's what would have ended up happening. I never saw that guy again. But so the last night that I was in the shed doghouse thing,
Mhm.
the Marine from the very beginning, the staff sergeant was back
Right.
from Afghanistan a third time.
The Craigslist guy, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. His name's Larry. I can use his name. He wouldn't care, but Larry.
We're like
Uh,
Craigslist X.
yeah, yeah. And I do. So the X, I use a fake name. I call him Evan everywhere, which is not
Okay.
actually his name. And I wonder because now the show is big enough. I'm like, fuck, he might see it. Like, I don't know, but I never say anything bad about him. Like, I take full
Mhm.
accountability for what happened. You know what I mean? So, like, I'd
Yeah.
like to think he wouldn't be upset about anything, but so like the last night I'm in there, Larry called and he said,
Mhm.
"Hey, I'm back and I'm out at 29 Palms, which is a base like 2 hours away from here. What are you doing?" And anytime he was visiting from overseas, he would like call me, and I was usually in a rehab or something. And he said, "I'm out at 29 Palms. What are you doing?" And I said, "I am living in a doghouse in Oceanside, and I think
Mhm.
I'm gonna die." And he said, "Okay, that's it. Like, if I come get you, will you come with me?" And I said, "Yeah, I will. I will." And he drove out and picked me up at a Burger King. I told the guy I was going to go use the bathroom or something and took off. And he came pick me up at the Burger King and drove me out to his house. And I kicked heroin for the last time. And that's my sobriety date. So I got there and I brought a little heroin with me. So I used for a
Mhm.
few days. Then I drank for like another
Mhm.
10 days or something, which a lot of heroin addicts hear and they're like, what bullshit. And I'm like, dude, everybody's body is different. I was just trying to pass out. Like there have been phases of kicking heroin where I couldn't have done that. But this time I had been sober at that long-term program before I'd gotten kicked out. So I'd only been using for like 2 months. So it was bad, but it wasn't like whatever. So I was drinking to knock myself out. And then I remember thinking 1:15:15 sounded cool. And I thought, I'm just going to make that my date right now. And I had done that a million times where I would pick a number that I thought seemed cool and I would make it my date. And I did it again. And I don't know how this time it stuck. And that was 10 years ago.
Did you go to rehab after that or anything?
No, I didn't. And that's the other thing that I think
didn't the last time either, and I've been to rehab a lot, but the last
we'd
time
already
I was
learned
like,
everything.
I've already been there, done that. It's time for me to figure this shit out at home.
Right. And I was gonna do that because you can get into that treatment cycle, right? Where the rehab cycle, especially when you're in the free ones like I was, the county detoxes and rehabs, eventually you just go to all of them, you know what I mean? And they know you. And I was in that cycle. And when I got kicked out of that long-term program before I went to the sober living where I was using, and she said I had to leave, I was there for like a month. When I got kicked out of that long-term program, I'd been doing really well. And I remember one of the counselors came in. I was putting all my stuff in a black trash bag again. And one of the counselors came in behind me, the woman that had got me in. And she was like, "What the fuck?" And I turned around and I was like, her name's Denise. And I was like, "Hey, so I know I fucked up. I'm calling Kiva, which is the other free one. I was like, I'm going to go get into Kiva." And she was like, "No, Jeanine, you've programmed up to here. Now it's just, are you going to fucking do it?" And she stormed out. And that's another one of those things that someone said that just sunk in. And he was right. And I do think that I never could have done it if I hadn't ever been to rehab before. But
100%.
So many times. As soon as I got to that sober living, I'm calling Rachel, my sponsor's been my sponsor for like 11 years. I'm calling Rachel from my friend's house already. You know what I mean? I'm like, fuck, all right, I'm alive. I'm at my buddy's house. And she's like, "Okay, keep calling me," or, and then like, when I came back, I knew where the meetings were. Like, so no, I didn't go to rehab this time. And my mom and I were actually just talking about this when I interviewed her. She was like, I just didn't think it would work because you weren't in jail or in a program. And when I came back, I was still sick. I was still kind of dope sick. And I was just like on the couch in this sober living with a phone that worked and no supervision at night. Like I could just walk out and do dope if I wanted to. I could go meet someone. And I just didn't. And I stayed on the couch. I was allowed to move in for $300 for the couch. And I didn't have any money at all. So like I had to pay it back. And I was only able to do that because I knew the owner of the sober living. And I moved in and I had done one thing before I moved into that doghouse. So I would go on Craigslist and see if anybody was hiring like fitness instructors, and sometimes even send my resume because I had this great, I taught at the Beverly Hills Country Club. I taught at resorts out here, good places. And the thing that made me like the saddest about my recovery or about my addiction was thinking I would never teach again. And I would send resumes to see if I could get calls. And I always would, always. And then of course I couldn't do anything about it or go. I wouldn't even answer the emails, but I would like do it just to see. And like a week before I moved into that doghouse, I went on Craigslist and there was someone hiring an instructor for spin and bar and maybe 20 minutes away from me. I sent my resume. The lady called me back and I actually set up an audition, which I had never done. I don't know what I was thinking, but I set up an audition. And then when it came around, I was strung out. It was like a few days later. I obviously couldn't go. I didn't even have a car. And I texted that I wouldn't make it, which is not something I ever normally did, but I did. And I made up this crazy lie. I said, my daughter is sick and I have to go pick her up from school. I don't have a kid. Okay. And the woman whose name is Jana was like, "Oh, okay, no problem." So I end up in the doghouse, 2 weeks later, I'm in a sober living and I have to get a job. And I was like, I wonder if that lady would like interview me again. So I texted her and she said, "Sure, of course, we can set up an interview." That lady is my friend Jana. I end up buying that studio from her 4 years later. We are still working together 10 years later. She was in my wedding and we became business partners later. That's her. I found her off freaking Craigslist. I saw her this morning. And
That's crazy. So you went from like strung out heroin addict, living in a doghouse to you bought your own studio.
at 4 years, yes. So I went down there, auditioned, and I was taking the bus to go there. I started with 1 class a week for $30 pay, and they quickly bumped me up to like 3 a week. And this is what I was saying in the beginning. I had been good before. Oh my God, I was so much better now. All I cared about was that studio and those women. Oh my God. All I cared about was my mixes and new choreography and, relearning again. And I was so grateful to be teaching again because I didn't think that I ever would, and her partner, like it was so important to me, the job. And so, yeah, I ended up at 16 classes a week. And at 7 months, somebody gave me a car. One of the clients gave me a car. And that really changed the trajectory of my life because I was nowhere near being able to like buy one. A client gave me a car, and then I was able to pick up some other jobs and met my husband. And right after we got married, they decided to sell the studio. And my in-laws did give us the money to buy it, right? So that I do throw that in. But what I will say is I would have been able to get it anyways from one of my other clients who would have given me the money. So like you can go from dirt nothing to something like this with no real resources is like my point in sharing this, So
Well, here's the deal. And I say this all the time, even about my business, opening a business, buying a home. Like my credit was 250. We had a
you bought a
house.
house?
I bought a house within
Wow.
6 months of getting sober with my husband, who I met and got sober with. And my credit was 250. He had never had or even owned a car, like a bank account, nothing. He was a meth addict. So, like, literally, we came together. And I say this all the time. When you start just doing like the next right thing, somehow things, call it miracles, call it God, I don't know, call it whatever you want. But like for me, it's like a God thing.
Totally.
Things just started happening for me, and
Totally.
like things that I would have never been able to do in life. I never thought I'd be able to buy a home or like anything like that. Like
Yeah.
my husband had didn't even have a car when I met him. We had a house within 6 months. Like,
And you're so right. And that's kind of why I started my podcast was to
yes,
tell people that, right? I was like, because I
yes,
had no hope that anything would ever be different. My
no,
primary fear was meeting somebody and getting married and my bad credit and never being able to buy a house. Those were my big things. Now, to this day, we still don't have a house. I mean, we have a house, but we haven't bought yet.
right.
We're also in San Diego. It's
Well,
crazy.
I don't have a studio, so like there's a
So,
so like
right.
I have
We'll
3
get there.
kids, so like it was like my dream
Right.
to own a house, right? I had my first
Right.
daughter when I was 16, right? Like
Oh,
we've
okay.
never lived anywhere, I'm 39, right? I got sober at 35, so like a house was
I got
like
sober at 35 too.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
like my bucket list to buy a house, and it was like
Yeah.
literally one of the first things I did.
How did you do that in 6 months?
I honestly, like, I just decided this time because I was like you, I continually kept getting sober. I wanted to be sober so bad. I could not figure out how to stay sober. And I finally figured out that, like, a lot of it had to do with, like, a lot of emotional trauma, right? Bad relationships, all that. I had a really good family. So when I got sober this time, I was like, I'm going to change my life. Like, I'm going to make it so I actually like my life. Like, my house was
Yeah.
trashed. I was gross, so bad. I'll tell you one day. But I ended up just talking to a friend. She knew somebody who did like bank loans, and they also did them all the time with people who had bad credit. So literally, she got with me, looked at our credit, told us exactly what to do within the 6 months, and we did it. And we had a home within 6 months. Like,
Wow. And you're still there. You've kept it.
yes, yes, I
Well,
probably, no matter what happens, will always keep this because I was like, that's like crazy. I never would have thought
yeah.
ever.
Well, I want to interview you for my show too and get that
Yes,
whole story a little bit more in depth, you know?
yes, we need to do it.
Because that's what I tell people. I'm like, look, once you start walking a path of, like you said, and I know it's cliche, but whatever, next right action. Once you start walking a path of next right action and living in alignment with your integrity and what you feel is right for you, you're no longer on man's conception of timing, right? Like humans' conception of timing. Because like when somebody gave me that car, I had managed to save $1,000 and I had 6 months. And the owner of my sober living took me to an impound lot to see if I could get like a really cheap car. And the cheapest, most buster car was like 2,500. And it had
Right.
taken me 6 months to get a grand, you know? And I was
Mhm.
like, I can do the math on this. I'm not gonna have a car for fucking years. I'm 35 years old. I'm only ever gonna be able to, and I was limited to where the bus line goes. So I couldn't
Mhm.
work, you know, anywhere else. Hold on, let me shut my door. My husband just got home. And so, and I was just so, I was so defeated.
Yeah.
Remember calling my dad and I was like, I'm nowhere near buying a car, dude. Like, oh my God. And I was just in tears. And he said, Jeanine, I can hear it in your voice. Like, I know you're this close to giving up. Please just hold on like a little bit longer. Literally, like the next week, a client gave me a car, a client who did not know I was in recovery. We were just
Yeah.
talking. And she said, hey, because again, I had done so well at that studio. I gave those women everything I fucking had. You know what I mean? Like, they
Right.
saved me and I, you know, I gave them some value in return, I guess, but those ladies saved my life. And I was in the back with one of them. And she said, hey, would you ever want like an extra job? My husband needs some accounting at his construction firm.
Right.
And I said, well, I would, but it kind of depends on where it is because I don't have a car. And she said, why don't you have a car? And I had an
Mhm.
answer ready. I was like, so I had one and then I had to get it fixed and it was like really expensive and I wasn't able to. And she said, okay, well, I have a car you can have. And
Mhm.
I was like, what? And she was like, I have a car that you can have. My mother-in-law keeps driving and she really shouldn't be. And you know, we've got this car. It's old, it's a beater, but you know, and I
Right.
said, well, I only have like $1,000, you know. So it's probably like worth more than that. And she was like, no, like I'm gonna give it to you. And
Mhm.
I couldn't even believe what she was saying, you know? And I was like,
Mhm.
okay, okay. And I didn't even tell anyone. It was so unbelievable. And
Right.
2 days later, I was teaching my Sunday class, walked out, and the desk girl was like, Michelle Dempsey left this for you. And she was holding a key. And I looked out in the parking lot, and there was a 1999 Nissan Maxima in the parking lot. It was mine.
Right.
Yeah. She gave me a car. A lot
That
of,
like makes me want to cry because like you never know, right? What's gonna happen or what you do for somebody that like
well,
literally could change their life.
we gave someone a car. So all she
Mhm.
asked was, she said, because when I saw her and her sister later, because then her sister also gave me a check for $600 to fix something with the car. So it was really from both of them. And I don't give the sister enough credit, but they was from both of them. And I said something, you know, I was like attempting to thank them one day, and they're like, just pay it forward. That's all we ask, just pay it forward. And a few
Oh,
years later, we had a car and we gave it to a coworker of my husband's niece, had just like gotten out of a bad marriage. Bro, she had 3 kids, taken the
yeah.
bus with 3 kids and like a stroller, you know? And we were gonna sell it to her for like, I don't know, like $1,000 or something. And I just kept thinking, like, we should just give her this car. And my husband
Right.
really generous. Like he would give away anything we had, you know. And I think I mentioned
Mhm.
something to him, and he, you know, he was like, "Yeah, of course." And then that day, she walked up with her envelope of cash, and I was like, "You know what? We're gonna give it to you. It's yours."
Oh,
And she just like started tearing up. And I don't usually, I never actually share that we did that because I actually usually forget. But I probably should share it because we did pay it forward. Do you know what I mean?
mhm.
Like we did. We gave someone a car. And a lot of miracles like that happened. And that's what I try to tell people in recovery. Like, I know the timing seems like it would never work, but if you're doing the right thing, then you'd be shocked what starts to happen, you know?
And you're right, it does sound so cliche, but for me in the beginning, because I hated all those little
Me too.
play the tape forward, do
Me
this, do
too.
that, and none of it made sense
Me
to
too.
me.
Uh-huh.
But doing just one thing, like do the right next thing, actually like helped me to like break it down. Like, because I would always look at my whole life and be like, Jesus, how am I going to fix this shit?
Totally.
Right? Like, where do I even start?
Totally.
But like, just the next thing. And
Yeah.
it actually, like, I do that now, right? Like,
Yeah.
when I'm overwhelmed, I'm like, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
What's next?
I actually have a theory about that. I think whatever the 12-step saying is that you hate the most is the one that you like need the most. And so like the one that I always hated was trust the process.
Mhm.
And I was like, what does that even fucking mean? And trust the process is like the thing I need the most in my life, is like faith that things are going to unfold correctly. You know what I mean?
For
Which
me,
is
it was
one that
always play the tape forward.
you
And
didn't like that one. Okay.
I
Yeah.
agree because honestly, now that I like my life,
Yeah.
I can think about like
It was exciting.
this year I've had a lot of crazy stuff happen. And I thought like one day, like, what if I just did drink? And I was like, oh, like everything would be gone, right?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
actually know what that means now, right? But
Why did
before
you hate
I
that
didn't
one? Do you think?
care. Huh?
Why did you not like that one in particular?
Because I didn't understand it. When I had the thought, when I was sober, when I had a thought of drinking, it was like the decision was already made. Like there
Right.
was no, I already know that my kids look at me and cry and all this stuff. I already know that I've been peeing in cups, throwing up in Walmart bags for months. I already know all that's going to happen and I still do it. So what do
Yeah.
you mean?
Right.
But
Yeah.
now it means something different because I don't want to lose what I have.
Right. 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 Or it means the same thing, but it has more value because you've built a life you love.
Yeah.
You
And I guess
know?
before I didn't
Yeah. It was
ever
like, I
work
didn't
towards
care.
that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Even if I can play the tape, I don't care what's on the other end of this.
I also didn't, so like I always would make it to around 3 months sober. And I
Yeah.
feel like for an alcoholic who's been drinking since they're like 12, right? It takes a long time to feel good in sobriety. So like the way I felt at 3 months, I was like, who wants to live like this? Like this shit sucks. Like I
Totally.
wanted to feel numb. I didn't want to feel anxious and depressed all the time and not wanting to get out of bed. But
Yeah.
that all goes away, right? Like how you feel at 3 months sober is not how you feel at a year sober, you
No,
know?
definitely, definitely not.
So I don't think I really gave myself that chance. I was just like, I hate how I feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Totally.
know?
Yeah.
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 Well, I'm so glad I got to have you on.
Me
Like, it's
too,
been
man.
so exciting. Thank
Me
you so
too.
much.
Sure, of course. I'm so glad that we did finally get to do this, you know?
Yes.
As we conclude this powerful episode of Controlled Chaos, a recovery podcast, I want to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every listener who has joined us on this journey of resilience and renewal. These stories are shared with the hope that someone out there struggling in the shadows of addiction may find a glimmer of hope and inspiration. If you're listening and in need of support on your own path to sobriety, please remember that you are not alone. Visit my website at www.controlledchaoscoaching.com and schedule a discovery call today. Together we can explore the possibilities of healing, growth, and a brighter future ahead. Thank you for being a part of this community, for your courage in facing your challenges, and for believing in the power of transformation. Remember, there's always hope, and help is within reach. Until next time, stay strong, stay hopeful, and keep moving forward on your journey to recovery. Love you mucho.